hppodcraft.com.
Are you ready?
Yeah, do it.
Welcome to the HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast at hppodcraft.com. I'm Chris Lackey.
And I'm Chad Fifer.
And this week we are tackling Through the Gates of the Silver Key.
Who's that written by?
That's written by H.P. Lovecraft in cooperation with E. Hoffman Price.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to, real quick before we dig into the story, thank everybody who contributed to the ransom for our Call of Cthulhu reading, which came out a couple weeks ago.
This recording was done entirely in Los Angeles, so I had nothing to do with it. It was all the magic of Chad Fifer and Andrew Lehman that really pulled this thing together.
Thanks. Well, you know, I'm not the guy with the superpowers. I'm just like the guy who gets the team together.
You're like Nick Fury is what you're saying.
Exactly. Because we got, I think heavy thanks has to go to Andrew Lehman, of course, you know?
Oh my God.
Just knocked it out of the park.
That goes without saying. Andrew is magic.
One of our listeners wrote in, Ross B. He said, a completely different take. Instead of depicting the story from detached reason, Andrew Lehman portrays the story as a truthful lament. I thought that was a great description.
Oh, yeah. It's great. But it's there. It's in the story. And Andrew does this great job of just bringing out aspects of the story that I maybe didn't recognize at first. But, it's all there. It's so good.
It's good stuff. And, of course, we also have to thank Reber Clark. The music it's so perfect and appropriate for the story.
Yeah.
Been selling the CDs of the music he did for At the Mountains of Madness and the score he did for his film Lovecraft Paragraphs. And of course, we used all that in the reading, but he also did a few original tracks for the reading.
Yeah.
And he's now offering those on his site as well. So we'll link out to that if you want to pick that stuff up. Great to play in the background while you're doing your Arkham Horror games and stuff like that.
Exactly.
It's good soundtrack music. If you want to download the readings that we produce, those are now available exclusively at our site. They're still free, but we took them down from the feed just to save bandwidth.
Yes.
So you can download them directly from our site. We want to say thanks so much to one of our listeners and a friend of the show, Michael Walker. He donated some of his own server space so we can mirror our reading files out there, and that way everybody can get them. And because there were a lot of delays when we put out Cthulhu.
Yeah, because it's a huge file. It's about 3 times as long as one of our typical shows, so it really kind of killed our bandwidth. We went over again.
So that's all fixed, and you can download them from the site. And thanks, Michael. We really appreciate that.
Thank you
so much. And of course,
much.
Michael Mann, who's taking care of all this for us. Mike Mann, as always, being the tremendous asset to the show.
Thank you so much, Mike, for being there for us, because Chad and I would be helpless little babies without you. Also, I want to say that we have a sponsor this week. My good friend Paul McLean, he has produced this amazing product called Lovecraftian Letters. You know those poem kits that you would get that are magnets? They're little words, and you would put them up on your fridge and you'd make out, your own poem. Well, he's taken a Lovecraftian vocabulary and put one of these sets together.
Yeah, it's great. We have it on our fridge here.
Oh, you have it? Yeah, you have it too.
Yeah, he sent it to me. Lovecraftian magnetic poetry. It's great.
Yes.
I've got some really weird stuff written up there.
I've got I've actually come out with some stuff that I like. But if you want to check them out, go to innsmouthhouse.com and you can purchase it. It's 19 pounds, which comes out to be about $30.
You're like a human calculator.
It's super cool. It's really neat. It's one of these things that I was just like, why hasn't anybody thought of this before? It's so cool.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Go to innsmouthhouse.com, and it's Lovecraftian Letters. You can't miss it, and you will love it. I promise you.
All right, cool. Well, we're about to dive into the story. Once again, this week we have an outstanding reader, Lance Holt.
Oh, Lance. Lance is back. He's done a few of the other Randolph Carter stuff. He was Dream Quest, and he also did the Silver Key, right?
Yep.
So if you want to check out any of Lance's stuff, he's done a lot of movie voices and things like that. He's at lancejholt.com. He's also going to be on there's 3D television. It's called Brothers Grimm Scary Tales, and he's in this episode called The Juniper Tree. He plays the father, and you can see him as a guy because he's actually not just a voice, he's a physical human being.
Oh, I gotta watch that.
In a vast room hung with strangely figured auras and carpeted with Pucara rugs of impressive age and workmanship, 4 men were sitting around a document-strewn table. From the far corners, where odd tripods of wrought iron were now and then replenished by an incredibly aged Negro in somber livery, came the hypnotic fumes of olibanum, while in a deep niche on one side there ticked a curious, coffin-shaped clock whose dial bore baffling hieroglyphs, and whose 4 hands did not move in consonance with any time system known on this planet. It was a singular and disturbing room, but well fitted to the business now at hand. For here, in the New Orleans home of this continent's greatest mystic, mathematician, and Orientalist, there was being settled at last the estate of a scarcely less great mystic, scholar, author, and dreamer who had vanished from the face of the earth 4 years before.
All right, so we're setting the scene. This is the return of Randolph Carter, or at least a sequel to The Silver Key.
This is a direct sequel.
So it is a direct sequel. It's a few years afterwards, and these guys, these are friends of Randolph Carter's, are sitting around the table trying to figure out what to do. Now they go to kind of do a recap of what happened in the original story.
You know, this being a sequel, doesn't that play into the kind of origin of the story and the connection with E. Hoffman Price?
Yeah.
It's sort of one of those things where he really liked The Silver Key.
Yeah.
And then pitched it to Lovecraft, like maybe we should do a sequel. Isn't it something like that?
He actually wrote a whole thing, and it was called The Lord of Illusion, and he sent it to Lovecraft and said, hey, I wrote this. What do you think? Let's collaborate on it. Because he was trying to get Lovecraft to do something, and Lovecraft just wasn't interested, so he just took the initiative and wrote a whole story. Then Lovecraft supposedly totally rewrote the whole thing.
And that's what this is?
And that's what this is, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a great way to get him involved. I really want to work on something with Lovecraft. He doesn't want me to, so I'm going to write a crappy story just to make him angry.
I don't think he was trying to make him angry. He was trying to, well, it's strange how they met. Price was friends with Farnsworth Wright, who is the editor of Weird Tales magazine. And Price had read Lovecraft's submission of Strange High House in the Mist and sort of panned it so it didn't get published by Weird Tales, and that was that until years later. In 1932, Lovecraft went down to New Orleans just to check it out. Robert E. Howard knew that Price lived down in New Orleans and telegraphed Price and said, hey, my buddy Lovecraft is down there. You guys should meet. And he's like, well, yeah, I kind of like some of Lovecraft's work. So anyway, they got together and they became friends. There's this story, which probably isn't true, but it's a good story anyway, that supposedly Price took Lovecraft down to this brothel in New Orleans and introduced them to a bunch of these prostitutes working at the brothel, and they all were fans of H.P. Lovecraft's work. Like they read Weird Tales in a brothel, supposedly.
Well, I really hope that's true.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's not true?
Well, supposedly that same story has been told featuring the author Seabury Quinn as well.
Oh, like
so
it's an urban legend? Where
yeah, it might be an urban legend. Yeah, exactly.
We've been with this character, Randolph Carter, through many stories. And,
yes.
And at least one of those is referenced here as well, the statement of Randolph Carter and Harley Warren and that whole incident.
Yeah.
They just kind of hint at in that second paragraph. And then they get into the Silver Key, but there's no real reference to
the Dream Quest.
The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath here, probably because since that wasn't published.
Well, there's a bunch of Randolph Carter stories. There's Statement of Randolph Carter, A Nameable, Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, The Silver Key, Through the Gates of the Silver Key. And then again, out of Aeons.
Yeah, Randolph is going to show up again later.
Yeah, he's going to show up again. So this isn't the last time we get Randolph Carter action. They mention all of those things here in the beginning and talk about his boyhood home and how his car was found. And there was no key in the car, but there was a sheet of paper that had some crazy hieroglyphics on it that nobody knew what it was and could never understand it. And
right.
It's a bit of a mystery.
They also mention his ancestor, Edmund Carter.
Yes.
Because and this is something, and maybe it's been mentioned before, but I didn't know this, that Arkham itself was settled by people fleeing the witchcraft trials in 1692.
Yeah, they did mention that before. I'm trying to remember.
I
think it was in Dreams of the Witch House they talked about it.
I mean, that it was actually founded on that incident.
Yeah, well, because there were all the witches that fled.
Yeah.
Moved to Arkham, so that's the new Salem.
That's amazing. It's like a witchy reflection of America. Their religion was being persecuted, so they fled to Arkham and made their own creepy world there. Okay, so we're getting caught up on this stuff, and why?
Okay, so these guys have gotten together because they're trying to settle his estate. Now, there's a few guys there. Ward Phillips, who's a cousin of Carter. The other is a French guy, Etienne Laurent de Margerini.
It's Etienne Laurent de Marigny. Marigny's a neighborhood in New Orleans, actually, right by the French border.
So that's where that name comes from, obviously.
Etienne, I think, is French for Stephen.
And I know the band Saint Etienne, which
Saint Etienne is a great band.
And then there's the lawyer.
Yeah, Ernest B. Aspinwall of Chicago. And Aspinwall, I mean, that's a great name because it really sounds like who this character is. He's a real crusty skeptic who's there basically. I mean, he's kind of the villain of the piece because Ward Phillips, who's an old man that believes in all of Carter's mystical stuff that he's always rambling on about. He's had his own dream life and visions of all this kind of stuff that Carter's into.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to settle the estate, or Ernest B. Aspinwall just wants to sell all this junk off, get rid of it.
And the fourth person is this Indian guy in a turban with a beard and everything named Chandraputra.
Swami Chandraputra.
Swami Chandraputra, who is supposedly a skilled mystic from the Far East.
Right.
Pretty much all these guys, except for Aspinwall are supernaturally inclined and scholars in that kind of world.
This is Etienne's this is his place that we're in New Orleans.
Right.
Yeah, he's got that crazy clock that has the weird interdimensional rhythms on it and stuff. You know, when I read Swami Chandaputra, for some reason, I just kept thinking of the character from Bozo, the clown.
Wizzo?
Yeah, Wizzo. Yeah, I don't know why. Because it's got such a whack... Like, I would have loved the name Swami Chandaputra when I was a little kid. It's just got such a fun, rhythmic...
Swami Chandraputra?
But Chandaputra, despite being from Benares, so he should be an Indian, but he's got perfect Anglo-Saxon English.
Yeah, but his voice is a little weird. It's a little metallic-y sounding, like he's got some sort of throat damage, which is a big tip-off right off the bat.
And he also has that Indian practice of wearing large white mittens. Wait a minute, that's not an Indian practice. So nobody finds that odd. It's commented on.
Yeah.
I forgot about it until I was doing a second rereading, and then I thought, that's the craziest thing in this story, that all those guys are sitting in a room and there's a guy wearing huge white mittens and nobody's saying anything about it.
Yeah.
That's the most unbelievable thing in the story.
Now, in this part where when they're talking, they sort of bring up, like you said, Harley Warren, and how there were symbols that matched the keystones of that grave where down in the catacombs where Harley Warren went with some of the stuff that was written on this paper. There was a keystone found in Arabia that also had these hieroglyphics on them. So there's some kind of big connection, but nobody knows what they mean or where they're from. At this point, Chandraputra says, you know what? I know where Carter is. He's alive.
Yeah, he just breaks out with that. He goes, by the way, guys, before we settle anything, I just got to let you know that, and it's going to be hard to believe, but I know exactly what happened to him.
And they're all, what?
In fact, he said something, he phrases it in a really odd way. He says, I have really learned pretty much what happened to Carter. Just sounds odd that he would say. Pretty much. I know pretty much what happened.
Pretty much.
The hills behind Arkham are full of strange magic. Something perhaps which the old wizard Edmund Carter called down from the stars and up from the crypts of nether earth when he fled there from Salem in 1692. As soon as Randolph Carter was back among them, he knew that he was close to one of the gates which a few audacious, abhorred, and alien-souled men have blasted through Titan walls betwixt the world and the outside absolute. Here he felt, and on this day of the year, he could carry out with success the message he had deciphered months before from the arabesques of that tarnished and incredibly ancient silver key. He knew now how it must be rotated, how it must be held up to the setting sun, and what syllables of ceremony must be intoned into the void at the ninth and last turning. In a spot as close to a dark polarity and induced gate as this, it could not fail in its primary function. Certainly, he would rest that night in the lost boyhood for which he had never ceased to mourn.
It's a recap of the Silver Key,
exactly.
Really, right?
Yeah.
He goes out, he drives out to Arkham, he gets out of his car, he goes to the snake den, he goes into the cave, he turns into an 8-year-old kid again, he comes out, his family's there, he travels through time and basically he's himself. Now, the next day he gets up and he goes back out to the snake den with the key as a little kid, hoping to unlock a gate somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So chapter 2 is just a quick recap of the Silver Key.
Yeah.
And that's just Chandaputra saying, hey, all right, here's what happened. Because these guys don't know that.
No, they don't know anything about that. They don't know that any of this time travel stuff went on. They just know he disappeared. And of course, Aspinwall just thinks this is all stupid and ridiculous. Everybody says, shut up. We want to hear this, because the other guys believe it. You know, they're of the mind. They know about all this stuff. And they bring up, of course, the Narcotic Fragments and the Necronomicon and all of these things about time and space. And it all makes sense to them that these things are possible.
Yeah.
One of the things that it mentions in the Necronomicon is that there will be a guide that once you go through this gate, there will be a guide that will guide you into the ultimate understanding, ultimate universe beyond time and space, like real crazy, trippy stuff. So Chandraputra says Carter used the key and went in search of this guide and what laid beyond. And it takes him to this place where there are these hexagonal columns. And atop the hexagonal columns are all these robed figures, but the robes don't have any faces in them. So it's just cloth. They're like wearing sacks over their heads.
Right.
And one of these guys, Umar Atwil, reveals himself to be the guide.
He's sort of the guardian of a bigger gate.
Yes.
All these people are around, and it's like the Jedi Council is there or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's this kind of circle of monsters or something, but that you can't really see. And there's a thing here where they talk about how Carter has no fear. And that's really the reason that he can
do these
things.
Yeah.
Because if you have fear, you're not going to be able to handle what comes next. That's really interesting, and it's not something that has been addressed, I think, in other
not at
stories.
All.
To me, I felt like it's kind of a metaphor for acceptance of our place in the universe. Carter's mind isn't going to be blown by anything he discovers. He's already accepted that we're insignificant and there's all these things that we don't know about and we're out of control. That's how I took it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's ready for it. He doesn't know everything yet.
Right.
They believe, and he believes. I mean, the guide says to him, look, this is the ultimate gate. Once you go through this, there's nothing else. This is going to give you this crazy view of the universe, and most people wouldn't be able to deal with it. And once you go, you can't ever come back. Like it's going to open up such terrifying vistas that you're not going to be able to unknow it. You have to decide whether you're going to do it. And Carter's like, yeah.
Of course I'm going to do it, man. No fear.
It gets really psychedelic, even more so. And there's all this crazy buzzing sound, and there's the unplumbed vastness of utter and absolute outsidedness with which the earth had nothing to do with.
There's all kinds of crazy ticking in there, like a rhythm that is kind of playing. And he actually, Chandaputra breaks in the story to say, Mr. de Marigny, you know what this rhythm is because you've got that clock up there. And I wonder if you know that clock has other properties. But anyway, let me get on with my story. It's kind of setting up something that's going to happen.
One of the things, too, that he says in here, how there was this background noise to the universe that he never heard before. But once he went outside of the universe, and it was gone.
He goes through the first gate. He sees the guide. The guide takes him through the next gate, and there's kind of a journey there, and that's what this is, right?
Yeah.
They're going toward that final gate, and there's this crazy... At one point, it's Carter realized how horrible it is for things to be totally silent.
Yeah.
Utter, and that means silent. It's just all sound, all vibrations in the universe are suddenly gone.
Yeah.
And it's this ultimate terror.
It's very cool. There's a lot of really cool things in the story. But there's so much that's thrown at you. It's a little hard to digest. And I've been, going over these notes, and I'm just like, we could conceivably talk about this story for episodes and episodes, but I think that there's not really a point. I think this is one of these that you just have to read.
You do. If you are into sensory overload descriptions and you like this, when Lovecraft does this kind of stuff, you'll love this story.
Yeah.
It would be kind of difficult for us to convey a lot of what's going on in this show. So we'll stick to the facts and we'll kind of skip through things here, but know that there are huge descriptions of lights and sound and all kinds of crazy stuff. When they go through the gate, something happens to Carter that's even more horrifying than the ultimate silence. He suddenly sort of splits into, or he doesn't split, but he suddenly realizes that he is more than one person. And this is really the most horrifying thing because he's losing his sense of self, his sense of personality.
Individuality, yeah.
And it's not that he split off into a bunch of different people, it's just that he realizes he's an aspect of a larger whole. They introduce it here when they say,
there were Carters in settings belonging to every known and suspected age of Earth's history, and to remoter ages of earthly entity transcending knowledge, suspicion, and credibility. Carters of forms both human and non-human, vertebrate and invertebrate, conscious and mindless, animal and vegetable, and more. There were Carters having nothing in common with earthly life, but moving outrageously amidst backgrounds of other planets and systems and galaxies and cosmic continua. Spores of eternal life drifting from world to world, universe to universe, yet all equally himself. Some of the glimpses recalled dreams, both faint and vivid, single and persistent, which he had had through the long years since he first began to dream, and a few possessed a haunting, fascinating, and almost horrible familiarity which no earthly logic could explain.
It's amazing.
Wow.
This is my favorite part of the story.
The old Carter, the old wizard from the 1600s, is Carter. It's not his ancestor. I mean, it is his ancestor, but it's also him.
Yeah.
There's like a primate Randolph Carter, and then there's amoeba Randolph Carter, and there's spores, and there's aliens, like in the future, throughout time and space. Like he exists not just in one space, but he exists throughout space in these different forms and time. And
it's more than just that there's so many aspects of us. It's that they say all that was and is to be exists simultaneously.
Yeah.
And everything is happening all at once. Each archetype, there's just several archetypes in the world, and we're all aspects of these archetypes. Think of it like a cone that if you were to slice in different areas would produce different shapes. The cone, you could see a circle, an ellipse, a parabola, right? It's saying you could see all these shapes. And that's kind of how we are. We're all just cut out of one archetype.
Yeah.
Because Carter is more than just himself in the past and future. He's also creatures of other dimensions and that kind of stuff.
Now, this is where we're kind of getting into theosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Price kind of turned Lovecraft onto theosophy as well, which is sort of this idea, which is kind of a New Age mysticism. It sort of borrows from Hindu religion as well, but it is its own thing, theosophy. You have to read more about it, but
right.
Lovecraft had read some of it, and this is definitely kind of his take on that. And of course, he puts his own spin on it. But
right.
in theosophy, there's different races that have existed, kind of ebbed and flowed. And before humans, there was some other thing. And before that other thing, there was this other thing.
Right.
One of the bits of theosophy is that we're all descended from this one race called the Aryans.
Well, theosophy's mentioned in other... I mean, I remember
it is.
In Call of Cthulhu, he mentions it. It's something that has shown up in his work.
But it's not inherently evil. Just because Hitler liked some aspects of it and took it to this really crazy place. There's nowhere in theosophy doesn't say you should start killing everything. And I believe in theosophy, everybody's of the Aryan, all humans, not just blonde people. So Carter's off floating in this void, but his guide left him.
This isn't the guide that's telling him all of this. The guide took him through the final gate, and the thing that is describing the shadow and illusion of reality to him and telling him how things really work is this presence.
In the face of that awful wonder, the quasi-Carter forgot the horror of destroyed individuality. It was an all-in-one and one-in-all of limitless being and self, not merely a thing of one space-time continuum, but allied to the ultimate animating essence of existence's whole, unbounded sweep, the last utter sweep, which has no confines and which outreaches fancy and mathematics alike. It was perhaps that which certain secret cults of Earth have whispered of as Yog-Sothoth, and which has been a deity under other names, that which the crustaceans of Yuggoth worship as the Beyond One, and which the vaporous brains of the Spiral Nebula know by an untranslatable sign. Yet in a flash, the Carter facet realized how slight and fractional these conceptions are.
He's out there basically having a conversation with Yog-Sothoth, and this thing is the supreme archetype. So there's many archetypes that we are all aspects of.
Right, and we learned something about Carter's connection to this aspect.
He is part of Yog-Sothoth's archetype.
Yeah.
Kind of conversing with himself in a way. He's just a different aspect of Yog-Sothoth, which is crazy.
So that means he is Yog-Sothoth, which is mind-blowing. And that means that Randolph Carter knocked up Lavinia Whately.
Right. So Randolph Carter is Wilbur Whately's father.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they're the same person, because wouldn't Wilbur Whately also be in the archetype with Carter?
Yeah, I guess.
Because all wizards, all great thinkers, all great artists are facets of Yog-Sothoth. On one level, all of Lovecraft's characters, in a literary sense, fit an archetype. They're all the same sort of character. And now he's really saying it in the literature that they are actually all the same archetype, the same person. It's a moment of kind of stupendous awareness. You know what I mean? It's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
This is the one greatest thing in the story that I took out that I've been turning over since I read it.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I don't think it gets enough credit at all.
There's a lot of discussion of philosophical things in this section. But what the conclusion is that once Carter realizes that he is everything he's ever been, that there are all these different aspects of him, what he wants to do is travel back to this one aspect of himself that he's dreamed about and experience it.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Now that he knows he is everything, he can move through time and space.
He can go to different areas of the cone, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly, and just live in it and be part of it. So then that's when things really, with that idea, it gets trippy, because then he literally is all of those things, because at some point in his existence, he's going to go back in time or go forward in time and live in those people, in those places. Man, it's just crazy.
Yeah, but now Carter wants something. He's like, well, if that's the case, what I would love to do is I have this dream about this alien world where there's these weird clawed snouted folks.
Yeah, they're like big bugs, bug people.
And I feel like I lived there at one time, and I would really like to go.
Yeah.
And experience it. And the presence says, all right, you can do that, but I'm warning you, if you go, if I send you there, if I grant this request, you better have all your magical stuff in order if you want to come back.
Yeah. And he kind of goes, yeah, I got it. I know what I'm doing. I got the silver key. I'm fine.
It's the precedent for Army of Darkness.
I've
never seen this in Lovecraft before, but Randolph Carter's so cocky He says, "Yeah, whatever. I know the words. I got it. It's fine. Just go ahead and send me."
Yeah.
This is his tragic flaw. I mean, he doesn't have that thing that they found in the car, right? There's like
the parchment.
The parchment that's got special symbols and stuff on. He doesn't have that. He's just got the key.
It's just like the Greatest American Hero. He doesn't have the instructions for the suit.
That's exactly right. Yog-Sothoth says, "All right, great. I'm going to send you. Your request is granted." And he gets shot into the past with just the silver key and without the instruction manual.
We go back to the guys sitting in the room. Everybody's pretty impressed. Well, not everybody. Aspinwall doesn't think, he's not believing it at all. He thinks it's ridiculous.
Nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Of course.
Because if I was sitting there and some weirdly expressionless Chandaputra was telling me this, I don't think I'd be on board with it.
Of course not. Well, we find out who this consciousness is that he wants to go back to. It's this wizard Zakakuba from the planet Yadit.
These names are kind of unpronounceable. He's a wizard monster.
He's a wizard monster, and he gets inside of this wizard monster. Now, the people of or the creatures of Yadith are fighting with bulls.
Mm-hmm. Those are those big worms.
The big worm things,
they
were in Dream Quest and stuff like that. Carter is able to get inside of his body, and it's a battle because Zakakuba is fighting for control. They don't merge and become one consciousness. They are two separate entities.
Yeah, it's tough because he goes into the wizard, and then he just thinks he's the wizard. It seems like everything that's come before was a dream that this wizard monster had. Right. Because now he's inhabiting that consciousness, so it's very difficult for him to think, to have the point of view as Carter. And I think he goes through life. Basically, he lives this thing's life.
Yeah.
For very large periods of time, because these creatures don't have mortal lifespans. They live for probably thousands, maybe even millions of years.
Yeah, they call it cycles, solar cycles, so you don't really know how long their years are or what they are, but for a long time.
But when he's got his Randolph Carter personality ascendant within the being, he's able to think, I have to formulate some strategy to get out of here.
Yeah,
he realizes that he doesn't have that parchment and he's trapped. So he's like, I got to come up with some kind of plan.
Yeah, because the key's not working. These aliens work on a completely different rule system than human beings do. He didn't anticipate that, so he doesn't know how to use the silver key because he only knows the silver key with being a human.
Right.
And now he's like, oh no, this is a whole different ball of wax. So he has to do all this research. But every time he's fighting with that consciousness of the bug guy, because the bug guy starts to think of all this Randolph Carter stuff, and it makes him go, that's crazy. I'm being crazy. And he tries to forget it. So Randolph has to kind of keep learning stuff. But eventually he finds this drug that suppresses the bug guy's personality, and he's able to do his research and figure out a way to get back home.
Yeah, he's dropping acid.
Well, they don't say that specifically, but yeah, sure, why not?
So when the snouted insect wizard monster is tripping balls and remembers that he's Randolph Carter, he comes up with this wild plan of escape, which is that he has to kind of make some calculations so that his body can voyage through this light wave envelope.
Yeah.
And kind of reemerge on the Earth in the time of Carter. That's his plan. He's basically going to angle everything so that he travels in time and shows up there. And then once he's there, he can go find the instruction manual that he left in the car. Mm-hmm. And with that and the key, he can resume his life as Randolph Carter.
Yeah, but here's the big problem. He's going to still be in this insect body.
Right.
He can't mentally travel and go inside the body. He physically is going to be inside this insect body. And so they talk about a lot of things where he has to deal with the germs that are going to be on Earth. So he has to prepare himself to be able to handle disease from Earth because it would instantly kill him, and also bacteria and things that might come from other from where he is. He doesn't want to bring it to Earth, so he's got to deal with all those things. I mean, it gets pretty sci-fi at this point.
Yeah.
And
it's fun though.
Yeah, it's really neat. He does that. He's able to figure out a way to do it. It takes a long, long time, hundreds if not thousands of years. And he flies to Earth. He talks about flying past the planets and about flying past Yugoth and all that jazz. And he lands his ship over by the snake den. And this is the plan where he gets a waxen mask of a person. Oh, he brings a bunch of gold with him too, because he knows he's going to need gold to get money.
Sure. And you can use that at the general store.
Yeah. And, he goes to the bank and gets the gold turned into money.
He shows up on Earth again, and he's saying, remember, I lived eons as this other creature. Here I am back in 1930, because he skips a couple of years. He doesn't get it quite right.
Yeah.
He wants to go to 1928, but he winds up in 1930. He has to walk to it's so funny. He's in this crazy snouted, clawed insect body, and he walks over to Arkham, gets his money changed at a bank. He rents a crappy apartment in a crappy part of Boston. And, he's got to keep taking those drugs.
Yeah.
Because if the wizard monster kind of wakes up it's going to be scared to death.
And it's going to freak out. And it's not going to know what to do. And it's not going to be coy and be able to hide and wear the mask and everything. It's a problem.
So Chandaputra says to these guys, all right, so that's the story, and this is what happened to Carter, and he's around. And so we shouldn't be selling off anything in the estate. We got to keep his stuff intact because he's going to show up. Once he figures out how to get his human body back, he needs this parchment.
Everybody's like, okay, that's pretty cool, except Aspinwall, who flips out and just goes, look, you're just trying to rip us off. You're trying to trick us. And then he calls him a nigger, which is really unexpected. And he asks where he got the key, because Chandraputra reveals that he has the actual silver key. But it's so weird that Lovecraft is using that word with an antagonist.
It really makes him look like an asshole. And Chandaputra, his features are normally placid because obviously he's wearing a mask, but his eyes are blaze when he calls him that.
Yeah.
He's mad about it. Please control yourself, Mr. Aspinwall. There's another form of proof that I could give.
Yeah.
He says to him, but I don't want to do that because the effect would be very unpleasant.
But he doesn't pay any attention to that because he, at that point, notices the mask.
Hey, by God, I've got it. This rascal is in disguise. I don't believe he's an East Indian at all. Well, that face. It isn't a face, but a mask. I guess a story put that into my head. But it's true. It never moves. And that turban and beard hide the edges. This fellow's a common crook. He isn't even a foreigner. I've been watching his language. He's a Yankee of some sort. Look at those mittens. He knows his fingerprints could be spotted. Damn you, I'll pull that thing off. Stop. The hoarse, oddly alien voice of the Swami held a tone beyond all mere earthly fright. I told you there was another form of proof which I could give if necessary, and I warned you not to provoke me to it. This red-faced old meddler is right. I'm not really an East Indian. This face is a mask, and what it covers is not human. You others have guessed. I felt that minutes ago. It wouldn't be pleasant if I took that mask off. Let it alone, Ernest. I may as well tell you that I am Randolph Carter.
All right.
There you go. Now we know.
I had no idea.
At this point, Aspinwall kind of goes at him and is going to try and pull the mask off. He turns his back to the other two and they sort of have a tussle. They have a fight.
Yeah.
Aspinwall gets the mask off. Now, the other guys can't see what is revealed with the mask, but Aspinwall can see it. And he freaks out and has a heart attack and dies.
He did whatever. When he got that mask off, whatever he saw was
really scary. At that point, Randolph Carter starts jerking around and chipping and chirping and making kind of bug noises and freaking out. Then Phillips moves to go to check on him, and the other guy stops him and goes, no, that's not Randolph, that's the wizard.
It's a Calba, the wizard of Yadith. Don't mess with him.
Yeah, don't mess with him. We don't know what he's capable of. And he just kind of moves around for a few seconds, and he opens up the clock, goes in the clock, and closes the door.
Yeah.
And then they open up the clock, and it's empty.
On the floor, the great white mitten.
So that's it. And
you know what? That was a reverse Scooby-Doo.
It was a reverse Scooby-Doo.
He pulled the mask of the guy off to reveal a monster.
A bit of a replay of Whisper in Darkness.
It is.
But it's still cool. And the fact that it's Randolph Carter is extra cool. So what was up with that clock?
I think if you know how to use it right, because it's got that rhythm the pendulum is making that rhythm that is kind of the rhythm of the whole cosmos, that this thing is a gate of some kind.
Right.
So if you know, because he hints at it earlier, he says, I wonder if you know about the other properties of that clock.
All right.
Now, what I don't know is, was it Randolph Carter who did that? Or was when the mask got pulled off, did the fright shock him into being confused wizard monster?
I don't know.
And just goes, what's going on? There's naked apes, I'm scared. And then he runs and escapes.
I don't know. And we don't know. He doesn't reveal. He's just, Chandraputra never shows up again. He's disappeared. And with Aspinwall dead, Randolph Carter's estate is in limbo.
Right.
They're like, well, maybe Randolph Carter will eventually show up and claim his stuff.
That's the hope.
And that's it. That's the end of the story.
Yeah, they just say, in that room, that clock is still ticking. I don't know if we did a great job of I feel this is a difficult one to describe. This story, I
feel like it would have been one of those where we would have to read almost all of the story and then talk about almost every 2 or 3 sentences, and it's too much. And I just say read it. It's really cool. It's trippy, but there's some neat concepts that Lovecraft hasn't really ever touched upon before. And it's neat.
I liked it. I love that concept of everything happening simultaneously and everything. There is no time. It's an illusion. Change is an illusion. This is all just different lenses we're looking through, the same simultaneous expression. It's very difficult to articulate, but the ideas are cool. It's really great. So he's just got a really wild character arc.
Randolph Carter?
Yeah.
He's got one of the craziest character arcs ever. Starts off as a kind of a wimpy guy who's pushed around and ends up becoming a god.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
That's pretty awesome.
It is. You know that Jason Thompson, who did the Dream Quest comic book, he just got some funding. He did a Kickstarter thing, and he's going to republish that with, I can't remember what the other stories are. I think it's The White Ship and The Strange High House in the Mist. And
Celophaeus.
Yeah, he's putting it all together into a big, oversized graphic. He has funding. That'll be pretty cool. I'm glad to see that got done.
Yeah.
What else do we have to say about the story? I know that there's some interesting stuff. Besides the brothel story, there's some other interesting things about E. Hoffman Price.
E. Hoffman Price eventually did visit Lovecraft, and there's this one story where he comes to Providence to visit him, and they're hanging out with a friend of Lovecraft's and Price's called Harry Brobst. Yeah, and they bought a 6-pack of beer, and then Lovecraft says, "And what are you going to do with so much of it?"
Yeah, he's such a teetotaler. They come over with a 6-pack. That's an unearthly quantity to Lovecraft.
Drink all of that? E. Hoffman Price wrote a bunch of other things, a bunch of short stories. He's published a ton in Weird Tales. He did a memoir of Lovecraft called The Man Who Was Lovecraft.
Oh, cool.
This story, Through the Gates of the Silver Key, was written in 1932, but wasn't published until 34 in Weird Tales. So there you go.
Gotcha.
Well, with that, I just want to thank our sponsor, this week's sponsor again, Lovecraftian Letters. For all of your magnet Lovecraftian needs can be met by this product. It's super cool, super fun. I've got the wife playing around with it. I recommend picking it up. Go to insmithhouse.com.
It's great stuff. Speaking of the wife, aren't you guys...
I just want to let our listeners know, my wife is due the 14th of November, which is coming up very soon. And I'm going to have to say there will be a bit of a hiatus, probably a couple weeks of no show once the baby comes. So I don't know when that'll be. If he's not here next week, then we'll record next week. And if he's late and he's not here the following week, then we'll record the following week.
We'll be producing shows until you start producing humans.
Exactly.
Or it'll just be me singing every week.
Singing what?
I don't know. You'll have to find out.
I'll have to tune in.
I'm going to make little goofy songs. That's what we're going to do to fill the time.
That would be great.
Totally unrelated to Lovecraft. Don't expect that.
Oh, all right.
Just going to be me singing about, blue cotton candy and carnivals.
Next week, if we end up releasing next week, it's going to be The Winged Death, and this is another Hazel Heald story.
Cool. Great title, The Winged Death. Okay, man. Well, a little long this time, so.
It's all right.
All right, well, thanks again to Lance Holt for doing such a great job with the reading.
Yeah, check him out at lancejholt.com, and I want to thank Mike Mann for doing all of his great stuff and keeping us afloat.
Exactly. And that's all we got. So I am Chad Fifer.
I'm Chris Lackey, and this has been the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
At hppodcraft.com.
hppodcraft.com.